Hey guys, welcome back to Builds by Maz. This is part 4 in my series showing you how I built this stone fireplace wall. This video will focus on the stacked stone insulation, taking your wall from here to here. This is a great finish for any media or fireplace wall, and it can make your home feel really upscale. Let's get started. The last video in the series ended here, with the HardieBacker cement board fully installed and ready for stone. I'll be using these XL stacked stone panels from MSI. You can see on the box how many different color options there are, and for this build I'm using the Myra White. This is a great product and I recommend it for a few reasons. First of all, it's true genuine stone, which is going to give you an unmatched aesthetic. There's a seamless application, meaning you don't need mortar in between the panels. You can install this inside or outside, and because of its unique shape, installation is really straightforward. Finally, because it's real stone, it never fades and it's maintenance free. This is how each panel looks, and you can see it's got a little bit of a Z shape. Again, this is the Myra White XL rock mount, and it's made up of a mix of stone shapes and sizes. Here's a cross-section view to give you a general idea of the thickness. It does vary from panel to panel to give you a nice variation. I'll also be using a few boxes of these specially made corner pieces. You don't have to use these, but I highly recommend it because it makes installation a lot easier. Also be sure to use a good quality mortar when attaching the stone. I like this one from ProLite. It's got high bond strength and it immediately holds. That's important because these stone panels are pretty heavy. I'll have a link to this and all materials used in this build down below in my video description. Preparing the mortar is pretty simple. I added the dry powder to a bucket and combined it with water, and then used a paddle attachment with my drill to mix it all together. If needed, add a little bit of water and continue mixing until you get the desired consistency. You're looking for something like this, a workable paste that's easy to spread but isn't too thin. Then be sure to let the mortar sit for 5 or 10 minutes. In the meantime, we're going to clean our surface. You want to make sure there's no dust or debris on the HardieBacker that could interfere with the stone's adhesion. Just use a damp sponge or towel and wipe everything thoroughly. After 10 minutes is up, we'll remix the mortar without adding any additional water. You'll also need a notch trowel with wide grooves. This allows you to apply more mortar than with small grooves, which is needed for the heavy stone. It's also helpful to have a laser level, and I'm using mine from Dovo. This will make it easy to get really straight rows of the stone panels. You want the first row to be perfectly level because it sets the alignment for the rest of the wall. To apply the mortar, use the notched edges of the trowel to spread it onto the cement board. The level also helps you know how far up the wall to spread the mortar. You also want to apply a thin layer of mortar to the back side of the stone panels, this time using the flat sides of the trowel. Press your stone into the wall, and you can give it a small shimmy up and down to help spread the mortar. Then, lightly tap it with a rubber mallet to ensure proper adhesion. I recommend starting with a corner piece and working along the row from there, but installation is the same with flat or corner pieces. You're applying the mortar to the wall with the notch side, and then a thin layer to the back of the panel with the flat side. So one thing to note is you don't need any mortar along the edges of the stone here. All the mortar is just going to the back wall, and then when you install the next panel, you get a nice seamless joint in between them. The Z shape of the panels helps to make each piece easy to align with the one beside it. Also pay attention to your laser level. If you need to make any adjustments here, you can use shims underneath the stone, but in my case I didn't need to. Now before you get to the end of the row, you're going to want to install the other corner piece. Unless it lines up perfectly, you likely won't be able to fit a full-size panel in the remaining space. So what you'll have to do is trim off this excess. You can measure the gap with measuring tape, or line it up and mark the ends with a pencil. For all the cuts on this stone, you're going to need a wet saw. This one I'm using here wasn't the best, and the cuts took a long time, so I do recommend getting a more high quality one. But just cut along your marked edges, and then test fit it to make sure everything fits properly. If it looks good, then go back and mortar it into place. With the front of this row done, I moved on to doing the sides. First I had to trim a little bit off the end of the baseboard to leave room for the stone. Then I measured out the distance needed so I could cut some stone to size. So I had to cut this panel basically down the middle, but it was too big for this table saw, so I wasn't able to use the guide. Instead, I lined up my framing square and then traced along my cut line. Then I just had to free cut this stone, moving really slowly and keeping the blade along my pencil line. Just another reason why I should have spent more on a better wet saw, but in the end it did work out and I was able to get this piece cut. It was the exact same process for the other side of the fireplace wall. I could then start on the second row. One trick to avoid repetitive seam patterns like this is to flip every other corner piece around. That way the stone edges are ending in different areas and you'll get a more randomized look. Adding stone around the fireplace can be a little tricky, and I'm going to have to cut an unusual shape for this panel right here. I got the stone in place and took a few marks and made a couple measurements to get the idea of the shape I needed. I adjusted the wet saw to the correct distance and then ripped the stone piece just until I reached the end of my mark. Then I turned my stone panel 90 degrees so I could finish my cutout. I then cut a few thin pieces for underneath the fireplace. It's also a good idea to refill your wet saw after every few cuts to make sure there's ample water. I then continued laying stone up along the sides of the fireplace. The next tricky part is installing the stone panels above the fireplace, because it won't be supported from the bottom. I cut out some 2x4s to the correct length, and I'm going to use these as the bottom supports. Even though this mortar bonds really quickly, I want to make sure there's no chance of anything sagging and getting offline. I used my laser level here to double check everything remained perfectly straight. This Dovo telescoping pole is a great accessory. It's easy to move the level up and down, and you can fine tune the adjustments to get the laser at exactly the right height. I added the stone panel above the right side of the fireplace, again using my 2x4 to help support it from the bottom. After measuring the distance remaining in the middle, I cut another panel to size and installed it in place. I stopped here for the day, giving everything time to dry, and the next day I came back and removed the supports. I tested the bond strength, and these stones were locked in place, so I knew I could stack stones above them and there would be no movement. If you have a mantle, be sure to protect it, because the stone dust can transfer pretty easily. Now, just by pure chance, this area below the mantle was exactly half the width of one panel. So instead of dealing with the wet saw, I could press down and separate this panel down the middle. Now, because my mantle is a drawer, I'm going to use some wood shims when installing the stone above it to give a small gap. That way I'll be able to pull the mantle in and out without there being any friction. Even if you have a standard mantle, you still may need shims if the mantle is not perfectly flat. That way you can keep the top of the stone level. I then continued upwards. I did leave the area right above the mantle unfinished, just so there wasn't too much weight on it while it was still drying. But once you get above the fireplace and mantle, and you're not having to cut out weird shapes to go around them, you can install this stone really quickly. I now have to do the row above the gap cut out for the TV mount. I lined up my laser level with the top of the existing row, and I'm going to use that as a guide to build the support piece. First, I took the width of a 2x4 and marked the bottom of it. Then I screwed in a short piece of wood on either side, lining up the top with my pencil mark. Then I could set a 2x4 on top, and because of my measuring, it's going to be the exact same height as the rest of the stone. Now I can install the next row, and it'll be supported by this wood piece. And just a reminder, don't forget the thin layer of mortar on the back of the panels. To do this angled ceiling, I calculated the slope and then transferred the measurement to the stone panels. I then cut them to size along my marked line. Because of the shape of the stone, I also cut out a few wedge pieces like this to fill in any of the gaps. Lastly, I came back to my mantle area and removed the shims, and double checked that the drawer worked fine. Then I filled in this last little section below the TV gap. The next day, I removed the support framing and all the stone was holding strong. For the final step, I applied some of this ceramic tile caulk. First I ran a bead along the back edge where the stone meets the wall, creating a smooth transition. I also did this along the top where it meets the ceiling, and then I filled in any of the larger gaps between stone panels. This caulk is sanded, so it feels like stone once it's dried. I just applied a bead in the gap, pressed it into place, and then smoothed it out with a wet sponge. I didn't use very much of this, just anywhere there was a larger than usual gap. But once everything was filled in, the stone installation was complete. This stacked stone from MSI really turned out beautiful, and it created a great finished surface for my fireplace wall. Remember, this color is the Myra White, but they've got plenty of different options to suit your own personal preference. All that was left was for me to install my TV, and my fireplace wall was totally finished. I hope you've enjoyed this series, and if you want to see more home improvement projects like this, then be sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.